Okay, go for it.
All right. Hey, good morning. Happy Saturday, everybody. And I am so thrilled to have two guests this morning. It's a double header. Not the exact same topic, but a related topic, related topics to mental health. First, a guest will be Amber Nicole Dilger. Her title is Stage Fright: Tools to Overcome Performance Anxiety. And then after her, Dr. Serena Hill LaRoche will present Self-Actualization Through Intention and Acceptance. Amber is a nationally recognized voice teacher specializing in helping singers overcome stage fright and performance anxiety. She's an equity actor, professionally performing in both music theater and opera. In addition to her performances and her degrees in vocal performance, she is certified in cognitive behavioral therapy coaching. Dr. LaRoche is an active clinician and concert artist. Recent performances include Barber's Knoxville Summer of 1915, Orff's Carmina Burana, among many others. She currently teaches eager graduate and undergraduate students at the University of South Carolina. So it's my privilege to welcome both of them. We'll first hear from Amber, and then we'll switch to Dr. LaRoche after her. So welcome them both. Thank you so much.
And do, there I am on. All right, so welcome. Oh, and I will start my timer to stay on time. Welcome to my very brief overview of stage fright, tools to overcome performance anxiety. And I wanted to thank you in advance for helping your students develop skills that can help them through one of the most frustrating and sometimes most frightening barriers they have to enjoying sharing their music with others. Fear is an interesting and often underappreciated emotion. I sometimes have students come to me and they say, I want to have no fear whatsoever. And I remind them that fear has helped us get as far as we have as a human species because it's trying its best to keep us safe. It might seem sometimes that it's doing it in a destructive and very questionable way, but we can learn to change our relationship with fear, and we can more effectively learn to work with it instead of having it control our situations. And since we only have time for a very short presentation, I've saved time by presuming some things. Since we're all teachers, I'm presuming that one, we know that performance anxiety manifests itself in many different ways and differently through time, depending on the individual. Two, we know the importance of normalizing and acknowledging the reality of stage fright. Three, we know how to work with the individual student to create graduated stress level opportunities of performing to help them experience successful performances through their journey. And four, we know that for any skills to be dependable when the stakes are high, we need to practice them with care and focused repetition far in advance of the big challenges. So, if there is one key ingredient to helping anyone learn to overcome their performance anxiety, it's this superpower skill of noticing. And unlike fictional superpowers, this real life game changer is a skill. And like any other skill, we can develop it and strengthen it over time. So, one of the questions I ask the most of my students of all ages and ability levels in my independent studio is, what do you notice? And I ask them this about any of their singing things and performing things, but also about situations that they just came from, if it was an audition or a performance of any sort. So we start even each practice session with a simple noticing exercise that helps get our brain and body on the same page and to ensure that our noticing skills are at the forefront of our work. I have a video link of this breathing exercise that is labeling in, out, and thinking on the resources page. That is going to have, I don't know, Jill's going to pop it up in the chat. But I think we have enough time to go through a brief walkthrough of this very basic exercise. And there are so many different noticing exercises that you can use, but I really like this one because it's graspable by anyone of any age, and it's based on breath. And for singers, There is nothing more fundamental to what we do than breath. I also really like it because you don't have to remember some saying or mantra or have a talisman in your pocket or anything like that. So the key of it is that we are just paying attention. We're using our breath as our focus. And when we breathe in, we label it in. And when we go out, we breathe out, we label it out. And then anytime we have any thinking thoughts of any sort, we don't engage in them. We just label them as thinking, and we redirect our attention back to wherever we are in the breathing cycle. And and I always use a timer for this. And at first, we'll start with a very, very small amount of time. And then as the students get more comfortable with it or they want a greater challenge, we'll up the amount of time. I do want to say a lot of people at first misunderstand the point of this exercise, and they think that the point is not to have extra thoughts. But we have human brains, and human brains are wonderful and messy and very busy places. And so we will have all kinds of extra thoughts. But the focus is to try to realize as soon as possible when we're thinking about something else and then redirecting. So we're strengthening the skill of redirecting our focus back to our breathing cycle. And in a real life situation, a good way to know why this could be helpful is if you are performing on stage, you are doing a wonderful job singing whatever it is you're singing, and then all of a sudden someone in the audience drops a program. Your attention immediately goes to that, and the longer you stay on that person, do I know that person? Is there an emergency? Do I need to stop my performance because we need to call for EMTs? Like, what's going on? The more your brain is engaged in that other situation, the more you're on autopilot with your performance. And so the larger of gap of time there is before you redirect yourself, the more of a chance of everything kind of falling apart. So you might come back and after a long while and not know, did I already take the repeat? Am I on the second verse or the third verse? Am I waiting for the trumpet solo to be done, or are they waiting on me? So the quicker we can get at redirecting our focus, the stronger skill we're going to have in a performance situation. So I always bring up my timer. And at first, especially with the little kids or people who are like, I can't do this. There's no way my brain is going to listen to me for any amount of time, I will set it for something ridiculously low, like 10 seconds or 12 seconds. That is a valid starting point. And usually even the young kids will laugh at the end of the 12 seconds and say, oh no, like I can totally do more than that. So then we set it for 30 seconds. And that's what I'm going to set it for right now, just so we can get an experience of what it's like. And so with 30 seconds on my timer going, if you can close your eyes, if you feel like closing your eyes, if that doesn't feel comfortable, it's really important to let students know that doesn't need to be eyes closed, but you just follow your breath in and out. And you just keep labeling in and out. And anytime there's any other thought, you just label it thinking and bring it back to wherever you are in the breathing cycle. That is 30 seconds. So generally, I have students work up to about 2 minutes. I have a little sand timer that I give them that's a 2-minute timer. But you can use any timer, the egg timer in the kitchen. It doesn't matter. But it's a really great way that doesn't take much time to, when you're starting your practice session, to let your brain know, okay, we're really needing to turn on our noticing for all of these things that we're doing. So mindfulness, or noticing, is one of the most valuable skills we can share with our students, both for singing and life in general. The term mindfulness used to come with a lot of unnecessary baggage, a lot of like spiritual religious baggage. I think that's changed in the last 10 years or so, or at least it's lessened considerably, but I still use the terms noticing with my students for my noticing skills, noticing exercises, but your mileage may vary, so you can use whatever you want. I do have this PDF also on that resources page, and so I'm going to share my screen very quickly. And this one. I wanted to make sure you saw this name, Dr. Dan Siegel. Dr. Dan Siegel, if you don't know him, he's a very fun American psychologist, and he is a very prolific writer and speaker, lots of video clips on YouTube, and has a website with a lot of resources. But he has a wonderful way. He mostly works with families, with parents and children, and he has a wonderful way of taking fairly complex ideas and concepts and making them very accessible to all ages. And so we're going to dig in a little bit more to his hand model of the brain. And he also has this phrase that I just adore, name it to tame it. So I wanted just to make sure that you saw the spelling of his name in case you wanted to look that up a little more. But it's really important for our students to know why we're doing what we're doing. And knowing at least some basic stuff of how the brain works is so useful in this situation of why should I even strengthen my noticing skills? How is this going to help me with performance anxiety or stage fright? And so if we had two thumbs, it would be even better. So if you have two thumbs, you probably have a lot of advantages in life, but right now we're just gonna make do with our one. And the thumb tucked in is going to represent an older part of our brain. So in the orientation is like the front of our skull is like the front of our knuckles. And so this older part of our brain is what we call the limbic system, and we're going to focus mostly on the amygdala and the hippocampus. And the amygdala is like the clearinghouse for our emotions. And with performance anxiety, fear is generally the main emotion that we're dealing with, but all emotions kind of come through this limbic system. And right beside is our hippocampus, which is kind of a library of sorts. And this library has especially declarative and spatial memories, so all of the things that we need as singers. So the memorized script and score, all of the memorized things that we're doing, including our blocking and our choreography. And so wrapped around the outside is our newer part of our brain. And the very newest part, our prefrontal cortex, is where our higher level thinking occurs. So this is where we get to use our imaginative and creative thinking, and where our rational thinking comes from, and where it is that it helps us know morally what is right and wrong. And so our prefrontal cortex is like our mission control center. And for it to do its best job, it's just constantly like going in and out and getting information from all these different parts of our brain and integrating everything. When our emotions kind of start to get bigger and bigger and bigger and get a little out of hand, it creates a lot of brain noise. So much so that the prefrontal cortex can't really do its job. Dr. Siegel says we flip our lid. He especially talks about it with kids when they're feeling really angry towards someone, maybe their sibling, and they are getting more and more angry. And at a certain point, they might hit their sibling, and they know in their prefrontal cortex, they know they shouldn't do that, but they just couldn't use their good rational sense because there was just so much emotion that they let get so big. So what can we do to keep the prefrontal cortex online and to have it help us in all of the ways that it really can make a big difference? So this is where Dan Siegel's name it to tame it comes in. So the more we can keep the prefrontal cortex engaged and naming things, pulling up words, talking about what do we notice, that's exactly the job of the prefrontal cortex and keeping that engaged. So if we can notice fear when it's a little fear, when it's just a tiny thing, and sometimes this might be months even in advance of a great big performance. Maybe fear, there are little things that are going on in our body. Maybe at night we're starting to have dreams about forgetting all of our words. And we think about, okay, I'm afraid. I am afraid that I'm going to just not be prepared for this performance. So perhaps you can make a choice if you were going to watch a movie with your friends this weekend. Perhaps you can make a choice to say, you know what, I'm going to take that time and really start studying my score early. And that lets fear feel seen, feel acknowledged, and it also shows that you're doing something about it. So the more fear can be taken care of, feeling taken care of, the more it will stay just kind of this manageable small thing. And then you're keeping that integration going the whole time. So this hand model of the brain is really, really useful for students of all ages to know about. And then the next thing that is on, I'll share my screen again. The next thing that is on that PDF is perspective and flipping your perspective. This grouping of lines, this illustration, I adore it. There are lots of illustrations that prove the same point. But this illustration is from 1892 from a German newspaper, the Fliegende Blätter, and it was an anonymous drawing. And one of the reasons I like this so much is people generally have an easy time seeing right at first either a duck or a rabbit. The duck has its bill pointing toward the left and the rabbit has its little bunny nose pointing towards the right. And it's a pretty easy thing once you know that is both a duck and a rabbit for your brain to switch back and forth. And this ability to flip our perspective is really important. Just a little aside, another reason I like that a lot is there is a kid's book called Duck Rabbit, an illustrated kids book that is a great way for even the youngest students to learn about this ability and the importance of this ability. And so when I am at auditions and sitting in the room before going in and singing and just chatting with other people, it inevitably comes up that I help performers of all sorts overcome performance anxiety. And someone asks, please, I feel so nervous right now. What can I do right now to feel better about this situation? I'm going into this audition. I don't want to be so nervous. And this idea of flipping our purpose, flipping our why, flipping our perspective is the thing that can be such a fast game changer. And a lot of times when we notice, when we look inside and try to figure out what's going on, why am I so worried? Things like, I am so worried that I will look like a fool in my audition. I am so worried that if I mess up some things, the people who are casting will decide they never want to work with me again. And all of these I'm so worried about me, makes it so that we're just in this tight little ball of misery. And if we can just switch our reason, instead of being focused so much on me, if we can focus instead on the art, on the song, on making it like we are just a conduit with all of our fallible humanity. Humans are fallible human beings. They're messy, and it's one of the glorious and wonderful things about humans that let us be creative, because there's no, we were talking before about the practice makes progress. There's no perfect. There's no perfect that humans can get to. That's the realm of robots and AI, and we're not quite there yet. So if we can bring our humanity to the situation and really focus on, I've prepared the best I can for this situation, and I am just going to try to get out of the way and share this beautiful piece that I have chosen. Share it with these other humans. Yeah, in an audition, there's just a couple of them sitting on the other side of the table casting, but they're still human beings, and our goal should still be to have this instance be a performance, an opportunity to connect deeply with other human beings. And so by shifting our purpose, shifting our why, and focusing on sharing the glory of our music instead of making it about the glorification of ourselves as an individual, we can make a strong difference in how we experience our performance. So that ability to flip the perspective is a really powerful one. And then the third thing that kind of comes under the umbrella of this noticing is this idea of character development. So this committing to the character. Instead of using our noticing to bring into ourselves as the individual performer, this is more we're taking our noticing and building as many details as we can about the world of our story, the world of our character, the world of this show that we are singing about or through. And all of the noticing skills that we've used to go through, what do we hear, what do we smell, what do we feel, what do we taste, all of these things can be applied to the character that we are singing through. And this is something that in a a show, in a musical theater show or an opera, a lot of times we are prescribed quite a bit of things by the existence of this bigger story. But even in standalone songs, we have the ability to create a great depth of details, of experiences for the story, whatever it is, even if it's a vocalise, the emotions behind this music that we are singing. And I often tell students that they are the luckiest producers ever of this movie in their mind because they have unlimited budget. They have unlimited ability for casting whomever they want as their romantic lead. They have all of the access to the most beautiful costumes and sets and locations. So there's really no limit to what can be done in this world that they are creating. And so the more we can pour ourselves into the details of the character's world, the further our ego as a performer will be from the experience of the performance. If we can see the gloss on the window frame and the angle of the sun as it hits it, and we can feel the breeze coming in on a slightly open door behind us, and we can tell that that breeze is keeping us cool because it's a little bit warm for an afternoon in spring, and we can smell the hyacinths on that breeze and hear the kids playing outside. All of those details make it viscerally real for when we are performing. And then we can also use it as a tool to help us remember better. We can create, because acting is reacting, we can create a kind of choreography of how we see the room. So if we know we need to sing about fish coming up, we can make it so something catches our eye in the corner and we see a picture of ourselves with our dad fishing when we were young or something, and that fish reminds us the next thing we sing about is fish. So we can use these details to strengthen the encoding of the memory building that we're doing throughout our practice for this performance. And so all of these details make the emotions and experiences of the story that we are telling visceral and real. And these details not only allow us to show and connect with the deepest human emotions and allow our audience to fully connect with our experience, but these details also provide a buffer between our individual fear and the portrayal of our character. So human brains have developed to engage in storytelling from the very beginning. The more deeply we are committed to the details of the world of our character, the more we will be focused on experiencing the story that we are telling, which ties right back to perspective. So just to share my screen one more time with this PDF. So this idea of name it to tame it, and really making sure we keep our prefrontal cortex online. This idea of flipping our perspective. If our worries are caught up in I, we need to flip our purpose. Instead of singing for the glory of you, we need to sing for the glory of the art. And this committing to the character by developing as many specific details of the character and story of your songs as you can, you create a buffer between your singer ego and the character that you are portraying. So, like many powerful ideas, at their core, these ideas are simple. They are very simple concepts. And many students, because they're so simple, are tempted to not incorporate them into their daily practice because they think, I know about them. I'll just turn on these skills when I start to feel nervous right before my performance, right as I'm walking on stage. So easy. We need to remind them that we have to work to weave these ideas into every part of our practicing so they become a strong foundation for our default performance experience. The old saying that we perform what we practice rings especially true with these skills. Teaching our students how to develop their noticing skills and then how to apply them to all aspects of singing and performing will allow them to be more resilient human beings in every aspect of their lives. This name it to tame it is an idea for all emotions, not just fear. And the ability to see situations from multiple angles and realize when one perspective is holding us back is a skill that can prevent lots of arguments and even wars. And the ability to know how to exercise and strengthen our imagination and our creative thinking can help us connect with other human beings in all situations of life. Fear has been an invaluable tool for humanity from the very beginning. It is detrimental to live a life with zero fear. Fear helps keep us safe. But we can all learn to acknowledge and honor our fear, and learning to utilize our noticing superpowers can help us have healthy relationships with our fear instead of letting fear take control over our situations. And I'm excited that I still have some more time to share a couple of things. I wanted to share a breathing exercise that a lot of people use. And this is one that's really good to kind of balance out your system once you feel things getting more heightened. And there's just one adjustment that I recommend making from what you might normally hear. So this exercise is called lots of different things: box breathing, square breathing, 4-count breathing. This idea of creating a balance of the in-breath and the out-breath. And then a lot of times people think, and the counts do not matter. It's just really about evening out the in-breath. And then a lot of times people say to hold your breath for that same count and then breathe out and hold your breath again. And I just want to put a little warning sign. Like, a lot of students, when you talk about holding something, they bring a lot of extra tension into their instrument. And so we're always looking for ways to find that tension and release that tension. So instead, for this exercise, I always talk about just floating or suspending. It's this idea of kind of like a pendulum swing, and that moment right before it changes directions, it just kind of hangs in the air. I also a lot of times picture the Matrix movies where they are just like suspended in time and space, and then it goes on to the next thing. So 4 counts is perfectly fine, but the way that this would work is to take a breath in for 4, and then just float for 4, and then out for 4, and then again float for 4. And then you repeat. And to let students know that this is a fairly easy thing to do when you're already calmed down, when you're already in a balanced state. There's going to be some resistance to this whenever you have the nerves kind of kicking up. There's going to be almost a little fight that's going on. And so you just do it a couple of times, and there's no place for judgment in this kind of a thing. You just do the best you can, and the more that you do this, the more it will you'll feel a calming down. You'll feel, oh yeah, I'm remembering from all of the practice time that I've spent with noticing my body, what it is like in a relaxed and balanced control situation. I can tell what nerves are doing to my body, and I can work my way back, maybe not all the way to what you are in a relaxed practice situation, but I can work my way back towards what that balance feels like, what my low expansive breaths, what they feel like when I'm not kind of working against all of the nerves tightening me up. So that box breath, I just like to really make sure people know, like, think of floating or suspension at those turnarounds instead of holding. And then I can still say one more thing that I wanted to make sure, and you were going to say this later on, but I wanted to bring to your attention that tomorrow, Sunday night, the National NATS chat is focused on music performance anxiety. So if you are interested in learning more about this, then it's always good to just dig in to all of the different resources that you can. So that was my super quick go through.
Amber, that was wonderful. Thank you very much. We'll hear you again at the end with your cohort. And so I'm going to switch our spotlights here. Just a second. All right. And we're going to add. And now we're going to hear from Dr. Serena LaRoche, and she's going to speak on self-actualization through intention and acceptance.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. Oh my goodness. What a wonderful presentation by Amber Nicole. I mean, lots of really great information and a ton of overlap of what I'm going to be talking about as well. Um, I love very much the breathing exercise that she just gave you, and so maybe we'll incorporate that into what I talk about later. Um, Let me share my screen really fast. So I have a little presentation here for you to see. Vocal reset, self-actualization through intention and acceptance. You know, coming out of COVID, singers have reported during COVID, but also post-COVID, reporting increased amount of anxiety in their performing. And and I thought it would be helpful to acknowledge that first and foremost. Let me hide that. There we go. Acknowledge that with this increase in anxiety in just in society in general, that we are going to see an increase in singer performance anxiety, and I think that most teachers are probably seeing that in the studio. Um, for some singers, this can be emotionally and physically debilitating. There was a recent article in the journal singing the Reentry Following COVID concerns for singers, and they noted in that article the neurophysiological side effects that this kind of trauma can have on singers. But anxiety in general isn't something new for performers. We've been dealing with it since the dawn of time. And as Amber Nicole said earlier, this anxiety, and we'll, for our purposes, we'll call it music anxiety or MPA, music performance anxiety. This is not a new thing, and it's actually quite helpful. The body is designed to deal with fear, that fight or flight response. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But I thought it would be really fun to look at the traditional coping skills to deal with performance anxiety through the lens of self-actualization and modern practices of self-actualization. There we go. So today's discussion, we're going to define and just talk about how to recognize MPA. For many singers, it's really easy to see. You see the shaking, you feel the nerves, but it can manifest in procrastination. Amber Nicole Dilger mentioned dreams and unsettled sleep. The different causes of MPA in COVID and post-COVID age, self-actualization as a concept in general, and then more contemporary thoughts on self-actualization, and then how we might use that essay lens to enhance what we're already doing to be more mindful in our practices of these strategies. Who am I? That's me, Dr. Serena Hill LaRoche. I teach at the University of South Carolina, and I'm also the South Carolina District NATS president. Why am I even talking about this? Well, personally, I got to a point in my own singing pre-COVID in which I felt like I had tamed the beast, that I had figured out how to channel anxiety in a way that was productive in performance. When I was much younger, I was a believer in the fake it till you make it. And so I was able to, not knowing that it was this anxiety, channel that toward energy in the performance and refocus that energy. But when I was in grad school, I was dealing with a little bit of trauma. My mom had died, and I was dealing with some grief. And I started having some performance anxiety that was really new to me. I did not really understand what I was doing, why I started to have a lot of negative, critical thoughts when I was performing. And it manifested in me through procrastination and bouts of extreme productivity. So I would stress myself out and avoid, and then stress and really attack a piece or attack a performance, and use the adrenaline from that to fuel the performance, which worked at the time but wasn't exactly healthy. And I went to Italy in 2003 and was able to work with a British psychologist, Elizabeth Winstead, and she was doing a workshop called The Inner Critic. This was back in 2003, and allowed me the opportunity to focus in on that issue and give me real tools to use in that situation to deal with the grief, and then ultimately to tackle that performance anxiety and learn how to redirect it again. What is music performance anxiety, right? The common names for it, stage fright, nerves, shyness, all of these words we use interchangeably. And what we're really talking about is situational anxiety, right? Not anything that is trait anxiety, something that you would need diagnosing for. And oh, I just lost my thought. It is something that most performers deal with. Even the most seasoned performers have dealt with it in some way. Historically, Chopin, Renee Fleming has talked about it extensively, Barbra Streisand, Jesse Norman, Madonna, even singers and creators like Lin-Manuel Miranda. There's a great video about him talking about it that I'm going to show in just a little bit. But before we get into that, I want to see what a few of the scholars have to say about music performance anxiety. These are just a few of the wonderful scholars that have already done such great work in this field. I want to acknowledge and recognize the work and the ongoing work that is happening. If you're not familiar with Dr. Lynn Helding, she does a lot in NATS. Most of you probably are familiar with her name. She's coordinator of vocology and vocal pedagogy at the University of Southern California's Thornton School of Music, and the author of The Musician's Mind, Teaching, Learning, and Performance in the Age of Brain Science. She's the creator of the Mindful Voice column in the Journal of Singing, and she's written several articles or co-authored several articles for the Journal of Singing. Dr. Heather Winter Honeycutt and Dr. Scott Winter. She is vocal studies and teachers at Georgetown College, and then Dr. Scott Winter, who's a professor of psychology and professor of internal medicine at the University of North Texas Health Science Center. Amelia Carr, who's a West End voice teacher and vocal coach working mostly with musical theater singers in performance anxiety. She's the founder of an online MPA workshop series. Dr. Diana Kinney, who is just a mammoth in just has provided a wealth of knowledge, several books, numerous articles on the psychology of music performance anxiety. Dr. Don Green, Dan Siegel, which Amber Nicole, she mentioned him quite a bit, and wonderful, wonderful resources. But Honeycutt and Winter define music performance anxiety as a nervousness during a music performance, as well as fear of the anticipated event, marked fear or anxiety about one or more social situations in which the individual is exposed to possible scrutiny by others. That's what Diana Kinney says about it. But again, we're talking about situational anxiety and not trait anxiety. And that's an important point that Lynn Helding makes in her article, Music Performance Anxiety. Recognizing MPA. How do we recognize it? We recognize it in our, obviously, our physical responses, our emotional responses, and then the observable behavioral responses, right? The autonomic responses, the sweating, panting, a higher heart rate. We have more adrenaline and cortisol flowing through the body, hot or cold extremities, clammy palms, shaking, body tension, gastrointestinal distress, and just an acute body arousal. And then cognitive or emotional reactions. We get the racing thoughts and destructive self-criticism, the lack of focus, inability to remember words that Amber Nicole was speaking about earlier. And then the observable behavioral responses to all that as well. Fidgeting, shaking, eye movement, swaying, stammering, stopping mid-performance, avoidance, procrastination, those kinds of things. And it happens to everyone. I thought it might be beneficial to hear from a professional musician who actually does deal with this. And we're going to hear just a really brief clip from Barbra Streisand, who is famously someone who deals with performance anxiety. So we'll listen to this really fast.
Well, I haven't necessarily overcome it. I have to deal with it. You know what? I don't know how many performers don't have it. I mean, it's hard to go out there and go, will you like the songs I picked? Will my voice be there? Will you like what I say?
So it's still a challenge.
I have to also have a goal. I have to have something I want that I have to work hard for. And there was something I wanted, so I thought, okay, I'll do this tour. It means it's like when I was doing Funny Girl on the stage, I wanted an Art Nouveau cabinet, and I had to save up for that cabinet. Well, that's my roots. You have to work hard for what you want to get. Nothing's handed to you. So that's part of my kind of DNA, Yeah, it's like, I get cold feet and go, why did I do this? I don't think I'll ever lose that little bit of stage fright,
Okay. I think it's incredibly helpful for yourself as singers and for us to remind our students that it is normal to have these feelings, and in dealing with it is what you really want to address, as are your skills in dealing with it. So as you're dealing with it, it's important to recognize what the causes might be. Some general causes: negative past experiences, right? You got up to perform one time and it didn't go very well, or you were criticized for that very activity at some point in your past. Pressure from external sources, or perceived pressure, like from teachers or from parents. Lack of coping skills to deal with elevated arousal. Do you do you not have you not worked through breathing exercises and things, or have you not had stressful situations to deal with in order to learn how to deal with elevated arousal, in order to calm yourself down? And then other factors, preparation. Were you actually prepared? Are you actually prepared? The scope of the task. Have you practiced enough? Are you overwhelmed with the job in front of you? And whenever you're talking about the causes of your anxiety, I think being honest and authentic with yourself in the moment is really key. Have I practiced enough? Is this something that's coming up from my past? And then addressing that possibly head on. And then COVID specific stressors, right? Before COVID, it had been reported that in the Kinney studies that she reported MPA and severe MPA in 15 to possibly 20% of singers. However, more mild symptoms were showing up in upwards of 90% of singers. But with COVID, that's actually been exacerbated with more anxiety prevalent in society at large. In October of 21, the CDC reported a 13% increase in symptoms of anxiety for Americans and a 0.8% increase in the severity of symptoms. And this information was gathered through polls and surveys, and all of this was during peak transmission. And the most significant stressors that showed up in those polls and surveys were reports of health concerns surrounding COVID, grief and loss of loved ones, financial strain and insecurity, isolation, lack of physical contact, and then singer-specific stresses, canceled engagements, lack of opportunity for live singing, added complications and mitigations, vocal strain from those mitigations, perceived stigmas about the safety of singing, and then just general uncertainty about the world and about your health and about your job, and as someone who works in the arts. What is self-actualization? The term itself was coined by neurologist and psychiatrist Kurt Goldstein, and it's mostly known to us through the use in American psychologist Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, food, safety, etc. And Maslow defines the term to be self-fulfilled or potential actualized, right? Or the realization of one's own potential. Maslow considered self-actualization as a state of being. The theory itself is continuing to evolve. American psychologist Carl Rogers would later say that it's an ongoing process of enhancing self-concept through reflection, reinterpretation of experience, allowing the person to recover, develop, change, and grow, so that it's not a static state of being, but something that you are working towards as a person. More contemporary thoughts on self-actualization. American cognitive science and popular science writer Scott Barry Kaufman said, and he directly relates the theory and practice of self-actuality with optimum creativity and well-being. Kaufman identified from Maslow's writings 92 characteristics that Maslow believed to be attributed attributes of the self-actualized. Kaufman identified 10 of those characteristics that could withstand scientific scrutiny, and he developed his Kaufman's 10 characteristics of self-actualization based on Maslow's theory. And they include a continued freshness of appreciation, right? You can appreciate again and again the basics of life, whether that's your favorite meal and enjoying the taste of it in the moment, being present with that appreciation, that thankfulness, that gratitude, that pleasure, enjoying a sunset, enjoying a practice session, enjoying a performance. Then acceptance, accepting that you are flawed as a human, that you have quirks and desires without any shame or apology of that. Authenticity, that you maintain an honesty and integrity in situations and environments. Equanimity, which he describes as more of an equal temperament. So in the ups and downs of life, you're able to maintain a more balanced equilibrium. And purpose, that you feel great responsibility and duty to accomplish a particular mission in life. Efficient perception of reality, that there is a truth and there is honesty in how you approach things. Humanitarianism, the desire to help the human race. Peak experiences, that that one would be able to observe and also experience peak experiences for themselves, experiences that are full and meaningful and fulfilling. Good moral intention, and then to have a creative spirit. And when I read all of this information, I thought, gosh, this is really a lot of how we approach students and working with performance anxiety in the studio, and also just general character work. Intentional practice of self-actualization. This is all great. How can you, as a singer, as a teacher, how can you use these ideas to enhance your current approaches to dealing with NPA? And chances are you're already doing it. And really the key is to be more mindful about doing it. And I'd like to narrow the discussion to just 4 key intentions here. Acknowledgement that leads to acceptance. Amber Nicole mentioned this a little while ago. Name it to tame it, right? Acknowledge it for what it is, right? Leading to more acceptance. Compassion for oneself, compassion for others, that would lead to appreciation or gratitude. A spontaneity that happens on the intersection of reality and intuition. What is authentically in the moment, and then your own intuition to help with spontaneity. And then purpose that drives authenticity, right? And all of this leads to our goals of dealing with NPA, right? Redirecting energy, calming autonomic physical responses, encouraging productive cognitive responses, allowing room for creative and authentic performance to improve self-efficacy and self-understanding. And using anxiety in a positive way to enhance performance is not a new concept. Lynn Helding actually mentions it in her article, Music Performance Anxiety. And she's referring to other researchers' findings when she says this, but she says many performers have learned that instead of aiming to extinguish anxiety altogether, a more fruitful strategy is to tame it. Which is exactly what Amber Nicole said a little while ago, so that's great. Through a variety of strategies to ride the wave of exhilaration that only a public performance can offer. And I thought it might be fun to hear a little bit about from another, maybe not so well-known singer. I'm kidding. Lin-Manuel Miranda. Let's see what he says about this, actually. Oh, nope. Let's try that again, shall we? Here we go.
Do you get nervous? I don't know that I've seen you nervous. You do?
Yeah.
Okay, you do.
Oh, I think if you don't get nervous before you go on stage, it's time to hang it up.
But how do your nerves manifest?
It's so funny. The weirdest memory popped into my head when you asked me that question, which is my first time on stage. I was in first grade, Hunter Elementary School talent show. I was lip syncing a Phil Collins song. My sister dressed me in like United Colors of Benetton. It was the 80s. And I remember feeling this stomach ache. Like it was really this stomach ache, and it felt like something that I could either fall underneath it or stand on top of it. And that's how I think of nerves. They're a fuel source, and they're rocket fuel. You can get on top of them, and they can power the ship, or you don't get on top of them, they blow up your ship. And that's how I think of nerves.
But would I see you nervous when you get nervous, or no? You hide it pretty well.
Yeah, watch the first 40 seconds of me at the White House singing that song.
The stammering.
The stammering.
I'm thrilled the White House called me tonight because I'm actually working.
Okay.
That's how it manifests. You hear me scream, "You laugh, but it's true."
You laugh, but it's true. He was
I'm just trying to get on top of the nerves and use them as rocket fuel.
So yeah, I think that's a great example of someone who's a contemporary right now who's actually dealing with nerves, even someone as popular as Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'd also like to share one more video really quick. This is a video of Dame Jessie Norman talking a little bit about exercises that she does, and it's going to lead us into what I'm talking about next.
This is Classic FM.
Before going on stage, I do a lot of deep breathing, which would relax anyone. Just try it. And I spend a lot of time thinking about the music, thinking through my texts, and thinking through if it's an opera, thinking through the movement that needs to happen on the stage. But otherwise, just being quiet and allowing the music to be present in my mind. I find that is the way that I prepare, certainly a few minutes before going on stage.
Yeah, this is great words there. So how do we actually apply this lens of self-actualization to common strategies to employ to reduce MPA? Amber Nicole mentioned a lot of breathing techniques earlier, so I actually won't go into them right now. But in those breathing techniques, she mentioned to acknowledge when the different thoughts come into your head, acknowledging what they are, whether they're thoughts, if you're doing it in the moment or if you're doing it as an exercise early on, acknowledging when those thoughts come in, acknowledging other things that are happening with your body, knowing the responses, and then either redirecting them or releasing them in some way, right? And I say here that it's really helpful to recreate them. And there are a lot of really great visualization exercises that you can do to teach yourself how to do this. And actually, Amber Nicole mentioned a couple, so I won't go into a ton of detail here. But if you can imagine yourself going into this performance that you're not so excited to do, and be mindful, being in the moment and acknowledging when the negative thoughts creep in or when the nerves start to flow, right? And then naming them for what they are, and then either doing a breathing exercise in that moment or learning how to separate those negative thoughts from the moment. I mentioned earlier that I did a workshop in 2003 called The Inner Critic. And when I was at that workshop, they did an exercise with us where we would stand and we would sing, and we had to raise our hand every time the inner critic would say something. And I would raise my hand whenever a negative thought came in, and eventually my critic would just criticize the fact that my hand was up the entire time. And one of the things we did was identify it for what it was and then separate it out from the performance itself, right? A way of compartmentalizing that, saying, I'll come back to that criticism later, but now I'm going to be in the moment, and then redirecting the focus to the performance itself, to the moment at hand. But if you're doing visualization exercises like this, see yourself performing well, right? See yourself doing a great job. Not if you're already having all of these feelings of self-doubt, and every time you think about the performance, you want to throw up, right? Then you're reinforcing that reaction every time you think about the performance. But if you can start to associate more positive things with the performance, then you're more likely to exhibit that behavior in the performance itself. And then just appreciate and practice gratitude for that moment shared with the audience. Other focus exercises that you can do if you feel that the performance anxiety for you is especially bad is finding other things outside of yourself that you can focus on. Things that you can hear, feel, smell, touch, right? In the moment, if all you can hear is the blood rushing through your ears, perhaps you focus on things that you can see in the room. I see a clock. I see my friend Jennifer. I see the floor, right? And really focusing in on those things and allowing your breathing to help focus you as well. But appreciating those things as they come into focus for you, and then the purpose will then lead to authenticity within the performance itself. Other things that can be in your bag of tools, movement-centered practices, journaling, positive self-talk, meditation, improvisation. There are some really great meditative improvisations that you can do that can be helpful in learning how to redirect anxiety, the energy from anxiety, into something that is more positive. And then just some more tips. self-care, practicing self-care physically, mentally, and emotionally. And if you make a mistake in a performance, knowing that that's in the past, you've already made the mistake, so don't continue to criticize yourself for it. Be present and move forward. Practicing mindfulness in everyday tasks can be really can be a really good skill to develop. Practicing compassion and gratitude, and find comfort and appreciation in routine. But I think that's it for now. We can talk more in the panel discussion here in a second. So I will stop sharing.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Serena Hill LaRoche. And I'm going to now also highlight.
Got it.
Oh, did you get it? Oh, thank you so much. Okay, wonderful job, both of you. That's such good information, such great information. And so what we're going to do now is just ask questions as you wish. One or both can answer them, maybe from their own perspectives. So just raise your hand virtually, or if you have your video on, I can see you and you can raise your hand either way, or we can do it through chat. Anybody? Go for it. Got these wonderful guests. Let's take advantage of their knowledge. I know I have a lot of thoughts or questions, thoughts, and I guess for me, there's several things, but one is the differences in personalities of singers. And I know one of or both of you said pretty much it happens to everybody. So the person that appears not nervous, are they really nervous and they've just learned to cover it, like with their personality? Do they hide it? And then you've got like the really skilled person. I mean, you presented some videos of really skilled singers who get very nervous. And then you can have other people, maybe not as skilled as them, who appear not nervous. Do you find differences in what a person's perception of their skill level is versus how nervous they get? Do the stakes change depending on that? I guess I'm throwing out a lot of different ideas. Any comments on that mess of a question?
I'll start if you want me to, Amber Nicole. I'll just say that every person is unique, and how they experience anxiety is going to be unique to them. And so they could still be experiencing MPA in performance and you not see any physical responses that you can see, but they may be compartmentalizing in some way or redirecting their energy in some way. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Amber Nicole?
Yeah, I was gonna say it made me think of, I sometimes have young students who haven't really done any performances before, and they feel like there's no nerves whatsoever. And they honestly have no fear. But then as soon as they do the performance that they thought they were going to, they have these ideas in their head, and the reality is slightly different. So I always think it's so important when we are done with a performance to kind of do an assessment to see, like, how did that go for you? What did you notice? What did you think? Because a lot of times as we go through this whole life of performing, like, things change about us, things change about our experience with the audience and with our perception and all of those things. So yeah, I think it really is an individual based thing that changes over time. So yeah.
I find it to be very dynamic and depending on the stressors that the singer is putting on themselves in the moment, because we tend to think that we get not nervous perhaps because the audience is going to judge us in some way, but that's not, if we can in the moment accept the fact that the audience is there to share the experience with us and to take, as Amber Nicole was saying earlier, to take the focus off of us and put it into that shared experience, then it takes that weight, that pressure, takes it off in some way. And like she was saying, I've known young ones who were not scared of anything, and then I've known, just the most seasoned performers who, perhaps the stakes are higher, who deal with a lot of anxiety, and have possibly developed tools to deal with it. So.
And I think I would tag on just a little bit to that from my youngest memories of performing on stage in shows, like it never, I was always one of those kids that was completely sucked into books and storytelling and things like that. And I never thought that people could see me when I was on stage. And I still to this day don't really think like they're not seeing Amber Nicole. They're just seeing a character through Amber Nicole. And so there is this invisibility that my brain let me develop, even from very beginning, just because I was so used to getting sucked in to stories, I think. So it really does, it's like such an individual thing.
And I'll say, Amber Nicole, I have a similar experience. When I am actually performing and in the moment, I don't see anything. I am so focused on the performance itself that, the audience is there, but I don't really see them. And and in that way, the focus is not off me. I would say it's much harder for me to speak about myself because then all of the focus is on me. And you see, I'm stammering right now. So.
Yes, Dr. Lewis.
Yes, ladies, this was so wonderful to talk about this and to give importance to this. Thank you so much, both of you, for this both of these excellent presentations. In my studio, we deal with this, obviously every studio does, I'm sure, because it comes up and gets to be a point where it's debilitating sometimes. But one of the things that I have found is helpful is to talk about the importance of not giving people thoughts, because when you imagine the bad things people are saying about you, that's not fair to that person because you don't know that they're thinking that about you. But also just this practice of doing that you get better at what you practice. So do you actively practice positive reinforcements or have them say verbally? How can you reframe that constructive thought? Maybe it's an issue you need to work on in this particular place, but actively reframe it in a way that is nice to yourself. I always say, would you say that to your friend? Then why do you say it to yourself? That's a very rude thing to say to yourself in your head or out loud. So why would you say that? So I wondered if you had active practice or methodical lessons about that too in your studios, or if you address that.
Yeah, I'll jump in really quick with this one because it is very clear. Like from the first lesson I have with any student, whatever their negative a lot of times self-talk, but also just scrunch faces and the getting angry at this one, like that is not allowed in my studio. Like we catch it and we turn it into something else. And usually if it's like some random unexpected thing that comes out of their mouth, they weren't expecting that sound to happen, we can just say, that's kind of interesting, and find the playful curiosity in all of those situations so that we can use them as learning experiences and not reinforce that, oh darn, and like erg and like scrunch faces. I don't even allow like negative faces about something that they've done. Like it's a very clear thing that we need to practice this every step along the way.
Well, and I would add to that. I just let them know first off that our lessons are a workshop. This is, if you're gonna make a mistake in here, make it loud. Make it loud and make it proud, and really go for it. And if you screw up, I want you to look outside. the sun is still shining, right? That life goes on and we learn from that and we move on. And much like Amber Nicole, I ask a lot of questions. How did that feel? How does that feel different? What did you like about that? And they usually will reply with something they didn't like. I was like, well, that's not my question. That's all well and good. But how can you rephrase that and talk to me about something that you really liked about that? Because it's important, as voice teachers, we spend a lot of time molding and crafting, and I have to be really mindful about this myself, that I have to temper my comments with things that that aren't just criticism, or would be in their minds perceived as criticism, but that I'm also giving the encouragement and really pointing out when things are going well and what they are doing well, so that that can help fuel them to work on the things that they need to work on.
That's great. I think we have a question. Is it Lonnie or Lanny? I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that. Could you unmute?
It's Lonnie.
Lonnie, thank you. Go ahead.
I teach a lot of. I'm a independent studio teacher. Most of my students are high school, but I have started teaching children. I'm running into little kids who start with me, fifth, sixth grade, and they've been little darlings of the theater world, and they have no fear, they love it, and they hit 12 or 13, and they realize and they get scared, and and I try to talk through this with them, and all of a sudden the stakes get higher, and they start getting afraid before performances, and it's devastating to them because they've never been afraid like that before. It was always just pure fun. And I remember having the same experience when I was transitioning from a child singer to a teenage singer. And I just wondered, what's the best thing to do with that? I mean, I give them the talk about stage fright. This is your body trying to keep you from being eaten by the saber-toothed tiger, all that stuff. But is there something like specific that any brilliant ideas either of you has?
I'll jump in really quick. I just make it a point from the very beginning of working with my students of all ages that talking about emotions that we have is not a taboo thing. I think in a lot of our society and our culture, we don't talk about emotions as just like a daily thing. But I think normalizing that and letting them feel really comfortable saying, wow, I notice that, or I feel that I am, starting to be afraid of XYZ. And it makes it so that we have a little bit of perspective, so that we aren't the fear. The fear is something that we are noticing is part of what we are thinking of right now. And I think by talking about and naming those emotions in very like everyday kind of experiences, that's a really important thing. And another thing that I have just started hearing from my like late grade school, middle school kids, and I hope that it's not a widespread thing, but it's becoming very cool to make negative comments to and about your friends. Like to put them down is becoming like, oh, that's how you know you're a really good friend, if you talk negatively about each other and you always tell them when they look horrible. And so I am really hoping that that's just like a very localized thing. But I make sure in every recital that I have, all of my students have a sheet that we write down the positive things, the things that we love about everyone's performance. And then I share those comments with everyone afterwards. I just want my students to get into the habit of choosing to see the good things about not only other people's performances, but then I'm hoping that also turns into themselves. If we choose to look for the positive, not ignoring the negative, but just looking at the negative as things we still need to work on, but really highlighting all of the good things. So that kind of ties back in with that gratitude and appreciation mindset. So that would be my.
Okay, that's very helpful. So, thank you. This has been a really great presentation.
We do have a question in the chat I'll read for you. This is Dr. Oni. She asks, have you ever worked with a student who was so convinced that MPA was a force they could not conquer, since long before working with you that they stubbornly refused to believe that your help and advice would make a difference? If so, how did you handle that student's situation?
I mean, I can jump in here if you like.
Sure.
Yeah, I've run into a few students like this over the years, and it's important to recognize as a teacher that it's not personal and that it stems from their own fear. And in that way, we can offer them compassion in how we approach them. And sometimes with those kinds of students, I might role play a little bit and set them down, and I perhaps pretend to be them and they pretend to be a friend, or like a friend of them, and I repeat back to them what they say and then ask them to respond as a friend. How would you respond to this? What would you tell yourself, basically? And if they can take themselves out of the equation and be more objective about their response, they're more likely to come to a conclusion on their own that what they're doing is not authentic, for lack of a better word. It is not reasonable. And they'll actually come up and kind of loosen that knot on their own so that you can get a foothold in and try to help them.
Yeah, and I also want to say I do a lot of work with students in conjunction. Like my students are also working with a therapist at the same time. And I've had students that like singing in front of others is one of their greatest fears in life. Like they would rather burn to death. I had one student say, I would rather burn to death than to sing in front of others. But she was working with a therapist and she came to our voice lessons. And by the end of the school year, she performed on stage. It was a big challenge for her, but working throughout the school year. And this was an adult. And I have this a lot. Like I have therapists that we kind of have like, it's just like voice issues. Like you're gonna send someone to an ENT, to an otolaryngologist, if there's something that's kind of beyond your scope, and working together in partnership is really powerful.
And I would also add that, people who have severe MPA, a lot of times have some kind of coexisting trait anxiety.
Yeah.
And Amber Nicole, as someone who has degrees in this, could probably speak to this more readily, but they may have some kind of undiagnosed trait anxiety or perfectionism that they have not actually dealt with, and it's just making that MPA more acute. So I don't know if Amber Nicole, you want to say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. That's why it's really powerful to work in conjunction with, they are going to a therapist and they go to voice lessons. And I kind of wonder, with Dr. Oni, with your comment, like they are there to learn from you. So there's got to be something that they are working with or working against within themselves that says, I really do want to sing. And I really do want to get better at that. Perhaps maybe their goals aren't necessarily performance oriented. I don't remember exactly what your question was, but they're with you for a reason. And so if that, even if that's like an internal battle within themselves, they are still coming to lessons. So yeah, there's something there that can be unpackaged, I think.
And I think I know for me and probably for all of you, you've had singers who really had no desire to perform, but they like to sing as a hobby. And I think that's okay too, that maybe I've had people, hey, I just want to sing better when I go to church, or I just want to sing around the house, karaoke or whatever, in my own place. So I think there are people that maybe that's their goal.
Yeah, I always on my intake form on the application that my students fill out, I always ask for their short-term and their long-term goals. And if their goal has nothing to do with performing, I do not push that. I honor them. I ask along the way, have your goals changed? But yeah, I absolutely think it's very valuable to even just learn to let your soul out through your music just for your own satisfaction. I think that's beautiful.
In my vocal pedagogy class that I teach, one of the units that I talk about quite frequently is goal setting, and about understanding the students' goals, right? That they may not be in line with what your goals are as a teacher. And so knowing that and recognizing that as a teacher is important. So if you have somebody coming to you that just wants to sing better in their church choir, that's a completely different goal, much like you were just describing. So
Great. Anybody else, either chat or that's here? Well, I think this was wonderful, and thank you again so much for your expertise. More to delve into with our singers and even ourselves, I think, I think how can I keep growing in that area? But I think it's important, as Barbara Streisand said, it's not so much overcoming it as how to work with it. And I appreciate that perspective that you both shared on that. So tools. So
yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And we'll be back at 2:00 with Dr. Wendy LeBourne about belting in the 21st century. So come on back. All right. Thank you, everybody. See you.